All right, we're talking about our suspects. I actually want to throw out one more team before we shift gears, because I'm curious what direction they're going in, or what their trade deadline looks like, because they look like a team that would be a suspect, but maybe they're not. What do you think the Columbus Blue Jackets do?
That's a team that's in an interesting spot right now because again, they've just changed obviously changing their coach. Rick Bowness now is taking over. They're on a decent streak right now, I think at least. I think they've started, I don't think they've lost a game yet with Bonus. I have to check exactly, but the at least the initial you're getting that first sort of what I like to refer to as new coach smell, like new car smell. Everybody's sort of invigorated and wants to obviously impress the new coach and be reliable. And then invariably, things start to settle in a little bit and you get to really kind of see where things are. And I think that's kind of where Columbus is at right now. They've already certainly made some moves. The Chinikov trade obviously was one, certainly for them with Pittsburgh. I think they're kind of like I said. If you're Don Waddell, you keep yourself sort of in that wait and see mode and kind of examine how the team continues to respond before you begin moving some guys off. That being said, if Columbus doesn't climb very very high in the standings, I could see them potentially moving. I think teams might be sniffing around their defense a little bit for sure. You have some cost certainty with, let's say, an Ivan Provorov in this case, if you want to get out from underneath that contract per se.
They just signed him, so it's a little hard there to sign to get a player.
Exactly. They wouldn't do it probably with him, but there would be some other, if they're looking to potentially do things longer term, sometimes you make those signings and then you're kind of like, a little bit of buyer beware. And you feel like, oh, maybe we need to move this one off. But that's kind of where I'm at with Columbus. I just don't know yet. I think they want to see how they respond over the longer term before they make any final decisions with their rosters.
It's almost like you asked me that question a week ago. I would have had one answer, and you ask me now, and that they're all
Right.
hot.
It was
You got a
sell,
different
sell,
answer.
sell. And Philly would have been the same
It's the
thing.
same. It's
Like
all these
Philly's
teams.
looking to maybe add tweak, add players or let things ride, and now they lose, and everybody's like, well, what are they going to do next? And that's the thing. The East is so tight
Yeah,
that a losing skid completely changes your perspective.
the Flyers, the Sabers,
Mhm.
the Senators, all these teams. It's one week you're a buyer, one week you're a seller. It's
Yeah.
crazy for this question. General question is best player who's going to get traded from now until March.
Oof, because the thing is, Anderson was probably at high on that list. I'd have to really kind of examine the potential upcoming UFAs who might be going.
I'll throw two names at you if you don't
Throw me,
have. If
throw
you,
me some names. Yeah, throw me some
so
names.
the name that everyone's going to respond to this question is Artemi Panarin because
Panarin, I think, is almost a certainty in this point. Alex Tuck, even with Buffalo being on, that's another one. Alex Tuck. That's
good one.
another
Yeah.
one where you have to, if you're Buffalo, you need to get some sort of certainty with him in regards to if he is going to return or not. That's the one that I think feels like that's something that Buffalo is in such a unique thing. Like if they were further down in the standings, almost
Yeah.
you'd be like, okay, Tuck gets shipped. Being said, you might get a team at the deadline who looks at him and just goes, "Man, we need what he could get put into our lineup. We need a sizable forward. We've got some pieces that might fit Buffalo, and some longer term pieces as well going forward." If you're Yarmo Kekalainen, you have to do the best you can by your team, and you don't necessarily want to lose a player like that altogether. So, yeah, even though they're in the playoff hunt, if their unique situation is if we trade Tuck, we got to get something also that we're trying like hell right now to end this playoff skid, and trades in that regard are going to probably be shaped in that way.
They are the team that a week ago, not a week ago, but like when they fired Kevin Adams, you're thinking, oh, Alex Tuck is gone. And now you might have to keep him at least because if you're going to make a playoff push, you keep him around for that. I mean, Panarin's the big name, I think. Everyone's going to think that he's the best player, probably is the best player on the trade block and his status intrigue. I'll throw one name at you, and I kind of wonder what you think about, first of all, if he is the best player that could get traded, but Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, because again, if Vancouver is in that, we are rebuilding state, Pedersen is again, he's a center, and that is a top six. It's difficult necessarily to get there. Now again, they could have dealt him before the summer, and before his no trade clause kicked in. They chose not to. That's on Vancouver. So he can kind of direct traffic a little bit as to where he might end up. So you have to look at teams that again, I think that would be trying to get that sort of postseason push going here. Could be another Western team in this circumstance. I could very easily look at that and say, hey, that's something that you're necessarily going to want to look at. Um, a team like, would it be crazy to think about, I wouldn't the crazy gymnastics that would be involved, but could could he be? I don't know if he necessarily fits from from the kind of personality standpoint that he has, but if they don't know if Florida doesn't know about their situation, obviously with Barkov, and I don't think there's a good chance I don't think Barkov is going to be back this season, but I think there's a window that he might if they get the idea that he's not going to be. But that's such a big commitment for them, I think, that I
That's
don't know
the
if it necessarily fits.
I because I think this is the thing. Like if the Canucks, it's clear they're tearing it down, and if you're going to tear it down,
Yeah.
he's the type of player that you might need to move to do that. And I mean, he has the no trade clause, so he really could make his decision on where he goes. But we were talking about it earlier that some of these teams that need that elite center who need to make that move for at least a center who has that top six upside. You mentioned the Flyers, but you look at like a team like the Detroit Red Wings. You look at that they need a
Detroit's a
second.
possible. I could see Detroit. I could see that. Philly,
And
I don't because I don't know the dynamics between Pedersen. Because the dynamics between Tocchet when he was there in Vancouver and Pedersen, I never really got a good feeling for the two of them. They're trying to get a lot out of obviously Pedersen, and I don't know if Pedersen necessarily responded particularly well to Tocchet's
yeah,
coaching.
I realize now. I'm like, yeah, there's the Flyers are out, the Rangers are out for that. Like these teams
Yeah, I
that
mean, once
have
I would have thought this summer that would have been before that would have been maybe a move Philly might have if Philly and Vancouver were going to do something, but when that kind of was told to me that it wouldn't probably be of interest to them because again, there's a lot of teams that do kind of question Pedersen's drive, and I think that's understandable. If you may look at it and say, if you're looking for us to absorb that kind of a cap hit, how do we know he's not going to go into some of that strange state that he was in last year? You just don't know. I don't,
it.
yeah.
It's interesting because there are the red flags. We've seen the red flags.
Mhm.
At the same time, some of these teams need to make a leap or need to make a push. You look and centers are so hard to come by.
Yeah.
And if you want to make a splash, for example, the Red Wings are in the same spot where they've been rebuilding for a while. They need to get into the playoffs. They need
Mhm.
to make that splash. And they have Dylan Larkin, but after that, their center position, they don't have center. So
Right,
getting him,
have a lot of journey. There's a lot
yeah.
of journeyman level centers on
Or
there.
you look at a team, I mean, you look at a team like the Wild who've been trying to go all in, trying to make a push,
That's
and
another interesting one there.
they need
Minnesota's
centers.
definitely, I think Minnesota's definitely sniffing around centers for sure, because especially once they dealt Marco Rossi, they're getting by with Urov and other centers that they have. Yeah, I think Minnesota's a team that could potentially knock on the door there and say, hey, we're making a push here, trying to keep, and again, Quinn, I don't, the dynamics between Pedersen and Quinn Hughes, but at least they're teammates who know one another and know each other's tendencies. Yeah, Minnesota's a place that I could potentially see just from an outsider perspective. I could have probably Minnesota writers maybe telling me maybe yes or no, but that's a logical thing to think about, especially when Minnesota's involved in basically on what I refer to as just this central division arms race now that I think exists
and
between
that
the Wild and obviously Dallas and Colorado.
and that's the part of that is that they're in this arms race and they need to make that move that gets them over the hump against these teams. How do you beat Dallas? How do you beat some of these other teams? You may have to take that swing. I Shifting gears a bit, I want to ask you about everyone's looking at the big move, those big blockbuster trades that are happening. What do you think is this year's version of the Brad Marchand deal? Because people forget Brad Marchand wasn't a big move at the time. The Panthers did not give up a lot and ends up
So
being
late in
pretty
the game
valuable.
too, because it was
Yeah.
Boston had given you the feeling that this was going to be you know,
So
where,
yeah, this year's version of that, where maybe a veteran player who's not going to go for much goes at the trade deadline, goes to one of
Mhm.
those teams that puts them over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at like a player that would be kind of a shocker. Again, you'd have to think to yourself, how, and again, I go back to I would be genuinely if Zibanejad gets dealt. I mean, I know it's part of that. I think he's got no trade protection, but all indications I've had is that I think Zibanejad has no intention of wanting to leave New York. I think he wants to be a part of whatever the future is for that team. They may want to deal him, but I honestly would be genuinely he would be a player that I would genuinely get surprised if he gets dealt at the deadline because I think he would block a move in this circumstance. And it would have to be a case where he felt really comfortable with going to that other team. So I would put him there probably as a player. I would have some surprise if he gets dealt. Ranger fans may argue otherwise, but my read on that is that they're going to really have to make it worth his while to
Uh,
move.
so yeah, and this is another situation. I'll throw two at you.
Mhm.
Just get your one has a lot of sliding doors where a lot has to happen for these trades, where one
Mhm.
team has to be terrible and the other has to be great or whatnot. But the two trades that I think about are where you talk about Brad Marchand, end of the career, when trying to win one more cup
Mhm.
type of situation, is Sidney Crosby, whether he goes to Montreal or Colorado. Got to keep that one in mind.
Yeah.
And then one more I'll throw out there. So you could just dive into both at the same time. But that's one that I have out there where if obviously the Penguins need to fall apart for that to happen and it needs to be after the
Yes.
Olympics. So it's a
That's
little that's like
that's
the final hour Sidney Crosby gets traded.
Mhm.
That happens. The other one that I think is interesting, just to keep in mind, Claude Giroux, whether he goes to Colorado or maybe goes back to the Panthers. Claude Giroux is in his final year of his contract. He's getting up there in age
Yeah.
to try to win one more cup. Ironically, the Flyers were great. That would have been a good spot for him to go back to, but they're not great now. So, I mean, if they are contending, maybe try to find a way to get him back there, end his career with one more playoff run. But Claude Giroux and Sidney Crosby, two centers actually, also. So,
Well,
really, really value.
Giroux's not as much a center now. He's a left wing. He's been a left wing for he's been a
Yeah.
left wing in Ottawa, and he was a left wing in Philly at the end of his time in Philadelphia. So I don't think he's seen necessarily now, and he was in Florida when he got traded there. That's how he's been played because again, the wear and tear over his career with his size, obviously has shifted him out off to the wing, and he's been effective enough as a wing. Crosby, again, Pittsburgh, they need to be completely out of it for that conversation to occur. And as long as they are still in range of a playoff, and those guys want to be, I know they do. The triumvirate wants to be together for a long, as long as they think they can compete, they're going to want to be there. It's got to be a case where Pittsburgh really kind of falls out in this circumstance. And the crazy part is like I could see Sid getting, if he got traded, a team like Colorado would probably be the one that would be the most likely. But again, they've gotten good play out of Brock Nelson, certainly as a second line center. He's, certainly been good for Colorado. So I don't know Colorado's necessarily looking for that rock the boat type of move in this circumstance. I think they're looking to enhance what they have. Because again, they've been on such a great run. The only thing that worries me with Colorado is when you're that good during the regular season, you start having and you don't have any adversity, much adversity as they have had to deal with this year. The coach almost sometimes wants a little bit of adversity because then you start thinking about Tampa from a few years ago and how far ahead they
Yeah.
were ahead of everybody.
Or
And then
Boston.
the minute against or Boston, or
Yeah.
Boston, where you're so far ahead and so good that the postseason begins and it's difficult to flip the switch. So in some ways, coaches, I think secretly, I always say they're kind of like they kind of hope something happens here at some level of adversity where the team has to kind of deal with things and has to kind of play through some difficulties before the postseason begins. So
Well, I think they could
Giroux,
still
it'll
make
be
a
interesting to
move
see but getting back to Giroux, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mike. Giroux is interesting. Ottawa's close to home, obviously. It's one of the reasons why he signed there. It's another case where you're really going to have to, much like I think with Zibanejad is a guy, you're going to have to really convince him to want to move in that circumstance, and if he's willing to move, where Ottawa in fact would send him. So I'll be curious.
Yeah, well, I think with both, it's yeah. When it's Claude Giroux, he loves Ottawa. He grew up there. It's like
Mhm.
going back home. It's do I want to end my career with one more cup run, maybe one more run at the cup? And links it to the Ray Boruc treatment, which is the
Yeah.
Bruins send him to Colorado to get one more cup. And I mean, Crosby the same way. I think it's interesting. You mentioned Colorado. I think what's interesting about I mean, I mentioned Colorado and you mentioned why they may not make that move. I think they're actually the same team that would make that move because they need that to make that to send that message that we are going all in. We still need to make that
You could, yeah, you
extra
could
move to
make
the
the
cup
move. Again, you could be looking at, could they be, maybe they're a team that's looking at Alex Tuck. Maybe they look at it and say, let's get, Tuck, because they have familiarity with him with playing when he played with Vegas. And they could use, there's always a sizable forward like Alex Tuck is always going to be somebody who's a contending team is going to potentially look at and say, hey, and they have some pieces that maybe Buffalo would be interested in as they try to make their push to the playoffs. So, although I think Colorado is also potentially maybe they're looking defense in this circumstance to shore up their blue line as much as anything. Maybe that one additional defenseman that could help stretch out their blue line a little bit more. That's one area.
because it's Makar Taves, then you have Malinsky Burns. Is after that it kind of
Some
drops off.
good, they're good talent, but you may
Yeah.
need, maybe looking at somebody who is maybe someone who is a veteran, maybe a veteran who's playoff tested, maybe somebody in that service. Why I didn't necessarily count them out for Anderson when the Anderson sweepstakes was going on, but that's another area to consider.
Yeah, it's I mean these are just ones I'm throwing out there and I'm like, yeah, maybe that could happen in the final minutes of the trade deadline.
Yeah,
That's like
right there at the
really
end,
late in
like
the
at
trade.
3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and all of a sudden that's a deal that comes flying out of here. It's possible.
Yeah, and we all go wild. But I guess before we wrap up, any other lingering thoughts you want to get out there? Trades, any trade go down maybe since we started recording. I mean, no,
Well,
we keep for
I
sure,
don't think any other deals happened since then, but we can always check in on that.
but
Yeah.
any other lingering thoughts off the top of your head as we kind of look ahead to the? It's funny, the trade deadline's a while from now, but it's like it is now as well. It does feel like you have to break down some of these
Yeah.
moves that are going on
Yeah.
now as well. So
Between now and before February 4th, when the roster freeze kicks in, what happens coming out of that? What contracts will get, extensions for potential RFAs that'll get done. And again, I feel like I said, with the Flyers and Trevor Zegras, I feel like right now that's in a decent spot. And Zegras is continuing certainly to put up points even while the team is in a skid. Although I think the goal scoring has slowed up a little bit, obviously. But I think he's still, even in the Ranger game, he's still one of the things that Zegras does is I jokingly refer to him, he's got like a cloaking device where he appears on the far side of the net for that patented one timer, and that's a good thing for Philadelphia certainly to have. And again, they're going to get that contract will probably get done. I just feel like for me, the Olympic break seems like a perfect time for them to kind of get everybody together to kind of nail that down. So I think certain pending RFAs will probably we hear about getting done over then, and then trade conversations. If some flurry of trades happens coming straight out of the gate, right as soon as the Olympics are over, right up until the time we get to the trade deadline. Yeah, it's an interesting year. You had the holiday freeze, then
yeah,
now you have the Olympic freeze, and then you have the actual deadline. So it's like three mini deadlines that teams are trying to get their situations taken care of, and I think they prefer to get it done sooner rather than all the way on the deadline. You get to really kind of feel like you're getting that one additional piece that goes over the top, sort of the cherry on top of the proverbial sundae, I guess you could say.
that's why we're in this wave where I think a lot of teams want to get their work done because they want to know where they're at, like
Mhm.
heading into things. And the other layer, I think we might have touched on it, but I'll also throw it out there is that if you're going to the Olympics, you're a player going to the Olympics, a lot of them want to get this resolved before before the trade before the Olympics kick in, where they don't want to go to the Olympics, they don't want to be playing on the Italian ice and potentially risking their injuries, but that's a different story.
That's
But
I think that's as much more for teams
yeah,
teams trying to get these things done prior to that. And there's always that risk that might occur. Because again, at the end of the day, the Olympics are a whole nother conversation with the ice surface and everything else. That's for another for us
yeah,
to that's for us to watch in February and go, or oh, this isn't so bad.
yeah, and I feel like that would be another hour, which I don't think we have the time for that. But yeah, yeah, but like, bottom line being that with some of these players that they want to get know where they're at, whether it's trade
Yes.
and extend and all that stuff before the Olympics kick in. So I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. And after the Olympics come back, where you can maybe see some of the rentals who were the depth players who weren't going to the Olympics anyway. But that's all we've got. I mean, this is a little bit longer of an episode, so I appreciate Anthony one for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it is not easy, and second, for a little bit of a longer episode for bearing with me, getting the extra caffeine in there to power through this one. So thank you for joining. And any quick plugs, anything you're working on? I'm sure there's definitely stuff to work on now because we had some trades that went
Yeah.
through. So what any plugs? Plug away.
So obviously for hockey, most of my work obviously is on Hockey Hot Stove. Myself and Bill Meltzer, we both kind of split responsibilities in certain areas. So I have my features when the team's on the road for Flyers Thoughts. So there'll be some Flyers Thoughts pieces coming out this week as the Flyers continue their road trip. New feature I've started recently called Flyers Focus, where for home games, I zoom in on the performances of certain players in overall performances. We've done a couple of installments with that. Obviously, Off the Post Radio, which we do twice a week on Wednesday afternoons at 4:30, and generally on Sunday mornings at 9:30. So we do that twice a week with myself, Mike Algello, who is obviously our Toronto Maple Leafs writer, and also site CEO, COO, and of course we have Russ Cohen, who is obviously providing prospect coverages for us as well at Hockey Hot Stove. So obviously happy to have Russ on board. But those are primarily the two primary areas, both obviously tied in with Hockey Hot Stove as well. So again, just head to the site, guys. Mike, as you know, our host Mike has plenty of content for you as well for both the AHL and the NHL. So yeah, absolutely. Come on hockeyhotstove.com. A lot of great content for you each day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, make sure you check out my work there as well. I got a bunch of pieces on the way, partially because this week's column's being broken up into 5 parts. But anyway, I digress on that. But yeah, that's all we got. Hope you enjoyed. Please now that I'm on YouTube, posting these on YouTube. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. You can do all that on YouTube now, and check out all the shorts that are going to come out as well from there. And we hope you enjoyed, and tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.